Yeah.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us again today. This time Sean has a design question for me.
All right. So the question is,
hmm
if you were designing a web crawler,
hmm
how would you avoid getting into infinite loops?
Um, so to clarify, you were saying how would I avoid crawling the same pages? I see.
Yes.
So like, if let's say one page has a link to another page, which might have a link to the previous page, how would I avoid um,
Right. Right.
looping, right? So how how much how many pages are we talking about? Like when we do this web crawler, are we?
Um, you will be crawling. Let's say it's like a Google bot.
hmm
They crawl the vast majority of the internet, the known internet.
Okay. Um, so I'm having a bit of trouble estimating how many pages that is. Um,
Um, let's
but
just say given a specific page detected there. So, um, sorry, I guess are you asking how many
so I guess
loops are there or pages are there in a certain given website?
I want to say if I do it if I use a brute force method, then perhaps I might keep a hash table of
Mm-hmm.
all the visited URLs, or at least, if not, maybe if not the URLs, the IP addresses.
Mm-hmm.
So let's just say URLs. Um, but then the thing is, I don't know how many pages it might end up crawling it, and this could be a very large database.
Why don't you give it an estimate based on your internet knowledge?
Uh,
Or do we want to set some rules here?
let, well, can we set some rules?
Sure.
Yeah. Well, I don't, because we also have, okay, so, uh, do we have to assume that there will be new pages added continuously?
Um, no.
So it's just a snapshot of the, the moment, and we don't,
Yeah.
okay.
So once you crawl a website, you don't crawl it again.
Mm, do we do anything with the crawled website, or are we are we concerned
We
about
don't do
that, or
anything with it.
huh?
We don't.
Okay, so let's assume we don't actually store or do anything with the crawled
Mhm.
website. So all we're concerned about is not looping back to the same crawled
Yeah.
websites. Uh, so assuming that there are okay, um, so another way of storing the websites might be to store it with hash it with the domain name. So maybe
Hmm.
let's say Facebook, and then that would point to another bucket with all the, maybe a hash of different sub-pages. So I guess in order to avoid crawling the same pages again, for every link that it sees, before the crawler crawls it, it would check in the hash table to see whether it's seen that URL before. And if it has, then it won't crawl. It won't crawl the page. And then so if it hasn't, it will crawl the page and add that to the hash table. So this is essentially a seen table. Is there any is there a particular direction you want me to take with this?
Talk about what seeing entails and what are the pitfalls for that it wouldn't work if you just store URLs.
So if the URL redirects to another page, then we would end up not storing the so-called real URL. So every time so for example, if we were to okay, if it redirected to another page. Let's say this is page A and redirects the page to URL B. We would store A in the table, but then when we somehow crawl page B again, we wouldn't know that we've seen it before, and we would end up crawling it twice. So that would be a pitfall.
Can you explain the A/B concept again?
Sorry. So let's say we have something. So let's say a.com.
Okay.
But it actually redirects. So actually, we have this page b.com. Except this URL actually redirects to b.com. So what happens is we're on a page, crawling a page, and we see a link, a.com. And so we visit it. And when we visit it, we store it in the table of seen URLs. And then when we actually crawl that page, we're actually crawling b.com.
Okay. But so are URLs a good way to determine if you visited this page?
But then we don't know. So we know if we visited the URL, but we don't know if there are any duplicate links to that page.
There's another case where the URL would kind of break. Can you think of that case? So redirect is one case.
You mean for invalid URLs or
For valid URLs.
valid URLs?
Think about like a get request.
So let's say if maybe not. Okay, so you were saying sometimes when you use the GET protocol, it might not work for this implementation.
How are parameters defined on GET requests?
So usually the parameters come, so it would be something maybe a.com, and then some page, and then you would have different parameters, so like parameter a equals a, and so forth. Parameter b equals b, and so forth. So the page, maybe it would be like a PHP page. It would display contents based on what these values are. But then, so
what happens if the server doesn't recognize the parameters that you're putting in?
It would return an error. So sometimes there might not be direct links to a link with these parameters.
Or what is a server that's programmed to fail gracefully? What would that be?
I'm sorry, what?
Server that's programmed to fail gracefully.
So it might redirect back to the home page or to a page that says this page doesn't exist. So so you would be crawling the same page each time, right? If you crawled the does not exist page multiple times. So that's another case where it wouldn't work. To prevent that, so to prevent the first case where you might have a redirect, I guess one way to do it would be to store not the link itself, but actually the address, the final address that it redirects to, so that
How about the second way?
For the other case,
so think about it in the bigger picture. We have parameters that, or we have URLs or URIs that don't necessarily match, but might return the same thing. What's another way to differentiate or to recognize if a page is the same, if two different links yield the same page? I'll give you a hint. It has nothing to do with the URL.
So is it the content?
Mm-hmm.
So perhaps I guess I would have to run the content through a some hashing function that returns. So run the content of the page.
Mm-hmm.
Through a hashing function to get. So instead of storing the URL, I might be just storing the So now the problem is, do I have to run this hashing function for every page I see?
Mm-hmm. What's the problem there?
Well, I would still be crawling the page, right? I would still be getting the page's contents, and instead of just skipping it. So I guess what we might be able to do is to use a combination of saving the URLs and the page contents. So perhaps we could have two different hash tables. So we would have another hash table with the hashed contents instead.
Mm-hmm.
So if we see that the URL has already been seen, then we don't crawl that page again. If it hasn't, then we also do a second check to see to see whether we've seen the content before. If we so I still see a problem because we would still have to. So the problem is we're saving the URL and we're also doing work by hashing the contents of each page, and here, like if we don't see if we haven't seen the URL before, we're still hashing the page to check whether it's already in the hash table, and that requires work. So I guess right now what we need to do is to figure out if there's a way we can figure out if there's a way to know that we've seen the page before without going through its contents.
Mm-hmm. So keep in mind this solution. There's no perfect solution. There's only good enough.
So the I guess the trade-off here is and with this, method, we're able to avoid crawling the same URLs, but if they have, and I guess if they have redirections, we can also avoid crawling those as well, because we also store the so-called the real URL of the page, so what it redirects to. So the times that this doesn't work are when it, say the page takes some parameters and the page displays the same content for maybe like different sets of parameters. In that case,
so let's look at the hash content. Yeah. Obviously, you're hashing a lot of stuff in there. Is there any way we can get some shortcuts? You're like hashing the whole HTML like output.
Perhaps
at this point.
Only the length of the content?
Only the length of the content? So as in like
or if we don't
the character count,
I guess if
the integer count?
We might not have to hash all of the content. We could just hash the body section of the HTML.
Okay.
Yeah, so we would at least we can ignore the headers. We can also avoid hashing the scripts, so JavaScript, and also avoid ignore the styling. So we would just be retrieving the pure HTML content.
Okay.
So that might save us a bit of space.
How can a priority queue help us here? Say we had one. Assuming we're not hashing the whole HTML.
So what a priority queue does is you can insert any element and it's automatically sorted. And when you have to get when you have to pop an element, it automatically returns the smallest or largest or whatever, however you define the comparator. So if we had something like that, would it help if we could return the shortest page or the longest page? I can't see it happening. So
let's say in your hash, right? Or you had a function that's like get hash.
Yeah.
You're not hashing the whole document. So you're actually like looking for certain tags or looking for certain content in the tags. So there might be very similar websites that will pass this, that will get a similar hash, but could very well be entirely different depending on the content. So this is a case where your hash is not perfect, not a perfect hash.
So how would we use a priority queue to help?
I guess are certain things more important than others to traverse first?
So perhaps, uh, so I guess like it really, so if we could have the contents of the page in a priority queue,
Mm-hmm.
uh,
What if we store the hash in a priority queue?
um, I guess what we would look at first in the page's contents are probably the title, um, and then like important keywords. So
Mm-hmm.
anything maybe like headers, uh, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, if we were to store the contents, so I'm not sure how storing the contents in a priority queue would help. I'm sure it would some way,
Okay,
but
no, that's fine. Um, all right, I think that sums it up for,
okay,
for this. For the priority queue,
yeah,
so one example you could use that is, since your hash table is not a perfect determinant
uh-huh.
of if two pages are similar, because you're taking some shortcuts, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can put things in your queue, and if you have a collision with a hash that's already in the queue, put
Uh-huh.
it like last.
If you have a
So make it
collision,
low priority.
then you put it last.
Put, yeah, so that the
So okay, if you're looking, so if you're looking to see if that page, if we've seen similar page content before,
mhm.
we look at, and if we have a similar, like if we have a hash collision, then
You say this might be
I don't.
a duplicate,
Uh huh.
but it might not as well. It might be
Okay.
just something very similar. But I'll get to that later because it's lower priority. Because it's higher chance it might be a duplicate.
Oh, I see. I see what you mean. So like you just
Yeah,
put it aside for now, and you don't crawl it.
yeah. You visit it when you have time later on.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah.
So
Uh,
that's a. I see. So by doing that, you would um, crawl the more important, crawl the pages you know that you haven't seen before, and
right.
these, there's a chance that you might miss some, but then you can save these till later.
Yep.
I see.
Okay. I think that's it. I think you did well explaining, or I guess defining what heuristic you want to measure duplicates
Uh-huh.
on. Um, the redirect was something actually not mentioned in the book, so
Oh, okay.
which is valid as well.
Mm.
So that was good. Um,
I was actually really lost.
I mean, this is like a very general question. It's good that you use the hash
Mm-hmm.
to detect similarity. Um,
Were there any things you hoped I would get right away rather than
um, I kind of
struggle
hope
with?
that you've gotten like URLs might not be a unique identifier
Mm-hmm.
for each page because of the parameters and because of redirects, and like and to see what other content you can use to determine similarity.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we could throw the whole hash into a hash table,
Mhm.
but that might not always guarantee. Well, one, it takes a little bit longer, right?
Mhm.
Two, it might not always guarantee as well, because maybe your title, maybe things are different in the header,
Uh-huh.
but everything in the body are the same.
Mhm.
So that might have some duplicates. So yeah, it's good that you wrote like, oh, look at the body where the content actually is.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think that's it.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Sean.
Yep. Yeah, and I think
Mhm.
the important thing is just to remember that there's actually no perfect solution for design, systems design, and just trade-offs in a sense.
Okay. Cool. All
Cool.
right. See you guys when we do the next question.